Guys, this woman had the audacity to call the police because my daughter hung an LGBT flag on her balcony. You know those people who can't stand to see anyone in peace? Well, only this time, she made a big mistake. She got the house wrong. She got the flag wrong. And above all, she got the person wrong. Because she decided that the symbol of chaos was an LGBT flag that my daughter had hung on the balcony of her bedroom. A cloth flag, colorful, discreet, with no music, no message, no protest. It was just there. And that was enough for the crazy HOA woman to think that the apocalypse had begun on the block. But let's start from the beginning. My daughter is 16 years old, with a head that fills me with pride and a courage that sometimes surprises me. When she asked me to hang the flag, it wasn't because she wanted to provoke anyone. It was because, after a long time of understanding and accepting herself, she just wanted a little piece of the world where she could breathe free. And I supported it, because my role as a father was never to shrink her world to fit the fragile ego of any neighbor, and even less to please the good neighbor inspector dressed up as a moral guardian. She hung the flag on Friday in the late afternoon, and on Saturday, before the sun had even reached the top of the sky, gossip was already boiling in the street. A lady from across the street made a point of walking up to the gate just to pretend she was going to take a photo of a plant while looking at the second floor of my house as if the flag was made of dynamite. And that woman from the HOA? Well, she wasted no time. She passed in front of my sidewalk with that judgmental look that makes your soul itch. The kind of look that mixes contempt with a hint of pleasure. Because for her, the more confusion, the more relevant she feels. Only this time, she went further. Not content with whispering to half a dozen neighbors who agree with everything she says, just so they don't become the next targets, the creature decided to call the police. That's right. He called 911 and, with all the conviction in the world, said that there was an inappropriate and offensive symbol displayed in front of a residence, and that this violated HOA rules. These rules, by the way, talk about fence height, awning color, and the height limit for the national flag. But there's not a comma about the LGBT flag, nor about morality, nor about the shamelessness of those who have nothing else to do. The call was registered as a minor disturbance involving a neighborhood dispute. And, as in many small towns, especially here where boredom masquerades as community zeal, these calls go straight to the local department. In this case, my phone. Literally. Because guess who's the county sheriff? That's right. Me, the flag owner's father. When I heard the description of the incident, it took me 10 seconds of silence just to process it. I thought it was a joke. But when I saw the address and name of the person who filed the complaint, I realized that the world really isn't for amateurs. The woman was trying to bring legal action against a flag, against a piece of cloth with 6 colors, against the sheriff's daughter. And she did it with such certainty that she was right, that she didn't even bother to check who lived in the house. Or maybe she thought I'd be intimidated, that I would back down, that I was going to pull down the flag so as not to cause trouble. There's just one thing. I grew up watching cowards try to silence what they don't understand. And my daughter wasn't going to be the next one to lower her head. So I got my car, put on my uniform, and went to answer the call. Yes, I did, because if she wanted the police, she was going to get them. Only in a way she didn't expect. The scene was worthy of a bad movie. Me arriving in an official car, parking in front of my own house, while the woman waited for me on the sidewalk with that little smile of someone who's already tasting victory. She didn't see me straight away. She was too busy trying to explain to another neighbor the importance of maintaining the visual standard of the neighborhood. It took the woman a while to realize what was happening. I got out of the car calmly, as if I were attending any other incident. She still thought she was on top. She walked up to me with that forced gait, the kind of stride of someone who is performing authority they never had. And before I could say anything, she started talking, fast, running over words, trying to justify the unjustifiable. Offensive. Small child walking down the street. negative visual impact, disrespectful to the family environment, a whole bingo of words that only mean one thing: prejudice wrapped in false care. I let her talk. Out of politeness? Maybe. But, to be honest, it was more for the pleasure of seeing her expression change when I finally opened my mouth. When I'd finished listening to that monologue of absurdity, I asked, in as neutral a voice as possible, "Could you repeat which house, exactly, is responsible for that offensive flag?" And then she pointed, right there, on the second floor of my house, with the same finger with which she has probably accused half the neighborhood of breaking the rules. She said it so firmly that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because the moment she saw my surname on the badge was magical. Her eyes went wide, her mouth stopped in the middle of the word violation, and she took a step backwards, as if she had been pushed by a gust of wind of shame. It was a silent but deafening moment. She blinked rapidly, as if her brain was trying to restart a reality where it wasn't happening. And I stood there, watching, because honestly, it wasn't just about me or my daughter. It was about the kind of people who feel entitled to dictate who can exist and how they should behave, who think that a flag is an affront, but gossip is citizenship, who have never had the courage to live a life outside the script, but have plenty of time to try and prune the freedom of others. She tried to pull herself together. Of course she did. She said she didn't know it was my house. She tried to smooth it over. It's just that this kind of thing attracts attention, you know? People comment on it. There are families here, children, as if my daughter were a public threat, as if love, identity, and pride were visual pollution. I responded as directly as possible. I said that the flag wouldn't come down, that my daughter had the right to express who she is, and that the next time she decided to get the police involved because of a colorful flag, maybe she should look in a mirror before picking up the phone. She stood there. She faked a phone call to get out of the situation. She faked an urgency that didn't exist. She turned away quickly, almost tripping over her own arrogance, and she returned to her house with the same energy as a withering balloon. The sound of the doors closing behind her was almost therapeutic. But, as expected, the episode didn't stop there. The woman wasn't going to let it go. Not with her being unmasked in front of other neighbors, because, of course, there was no shortage of prying eyes watching from afar. The whole neighborhood was in soap opera mode. And the problem with these figures is that they can't accept being unmasked. They come back. They always come back. Only sneakier, more poisonous, more dangerous. Over the next few days, the whispers began. Little comments here and there about the sheriff losing his grip, the daughter wanting to show off, the neighborhood getting too liberal. All said in that typical tone. The woman no longer spoke directly, but her venom oozed through the gossip corridors. But she forgot one important detail. We weren't dealing with just any father. She poked at a daughter who had a voice, and a father who had a position. And the story was far from over. The most absurd part is that, even after being beaten live and in color, the woman had the courage, or the outburst, I can no longer tell the difference, to continue insisting that what she did was right. It turns out that these types of people are never wrong. In their minds, they don't apologize. They rephrase the mistake and turn it into a moral mission. And that's exactly what she tried to do. She started showing up at HOA meetings with a folder in her hand full of papers that she swore were proof that the neighborhood was losing control. Photos of houses with non-standard decor, lawns with different colors, even a house with a gnome statue that, according to her, was too suggestive for a family environment. My daughter's flag became a symbol of the beginning of disorder. She said this with a certainty that only those who live in denial can sustain. The woman really thought she was protecting the world from a colorful rebellion. And all this without a shred of shame on her face, even after being unmasked by me, in the role of sheriff, in the middle of the street, in front of half the neighborhood. But the problem was that her obsession began to escalate. It went from discreet defamation to persecution disguised as civic concern. One day, my daughter came home from school with red eyes. She tried to pretend it was tiredness, but I know that look. It was humiliation. It was pain. I found out that a neighbor, a close friend of the woman, had made comments about the flag in front of other teenagers. Poisonous comments, the kind that don't say anyone's name, but hit like a stone. And guess who spread the story? That the sheriff can't even control his own house. That's right, the same woman who called the police about fabric. Then things changed. Because it's one thing to talk about me, it's another to talk about my daughter. She had already faced too much to accept herself, to come out of the closet, to have the courage to be who she is. She wasn't going to let anyone make her hide again. I already knew I needed to act, but with precision. Because now it wasn't just about responding to gossip. It was about protecting the space of someone who I had promised, since she was born, would be safe as long as I breathed. So I dug deep. I talked to other neighbors who were already tired of this woman's attitudes. I went after old cases, records of complaints that had never been taken forward because people were afraid to fight back. I found more than I expected. There were people who cried, remembering the day she knocked on the door to complain about the presence of a black grandson who didn't look like a member of the family. There was another case where she threatened to call the Animal Protection Service because the neighbor's cat behaved strangely. I heard so much nonsense that I wanted to dig a hole with my own flag just to bury this kind of behavior. With all this in hand, I called an extraordinary meeting with the HOA leadership. I used my position to force the meeting because it was no longer gossip, it was a pattern of abuse. I brought everything in print, with statements, dates, and even some audio recordings that a neighbor had accidentally recorded while she was bad-mouthing an immigrant family. I laid everything on the table and said, without raising my voice, but letting every word carry weight, this isn't about neighborhood rules. This is about prejudice, persecution, and an inflated ego that is hurting this entire community. She didn't show up for the meeting. Of course she didn't. She heard she'd been summoned, and, rather than face it, she preferred to fake a sudden trip, a strategic exit, through cowardice. But even when she was absent, her image began to fall apart among her own followers. People who had previously defended her began to remain silent. People who treated her like an informal neighborhood authority began to see that, deep down, she was just another tired figure trying to control the world, because she couldn't even control her own resentment. And little by little, the tables were turned. My daughter's flag was still on the balcony, untouched, beautiful. And now it was more than a symbol of pride. It was resistance. It was a warning. It was a reminder that, yes, there are people who still think they can control others with made-up rules, but there are also those who won't bow their heads. And this time, she was the one who messed with the wrong person. The irony of it all is that she disappeared the same way she arrived, making a fuss and leaving dust behind. After the HOA meeting, she never tried to attract the same attention as before. And not because she regretted it, because people like that don't learn. They only back down when they're hit in the face. But because she knew that, this time, no one would applaud her show. She lost what she valued most, her pose, the invented status of guardian of neighborhood morality. That role she wrote, directed, starred in, and thought was going to win an award. People began to treat her with that uncomfortable silence that says more than 1,000 words. Greetings became just a distant nod. No one stopped to listen to her daily complaints about badly cut grass or barking dogs. And what hurt her wasn't even the rejection, it was the irrelevance. She didn't bother anymore because nobody cared. That's the worst punishment for someone who always wanted to be the center of decisions in a neighborhood that only wanted peace. Meanwhile, my daughter flourished. The flag continued to hang, more firmly than ever, and over time, it became an inspiration. Other houses began to put up small symbols of support, a sticker on the car, a colorful bracelet, a rainbow t-shirt. It was little, but It was everything. It was as if the neighborhood was saying, in silence, "We saw what you did, and we don't agree." What was supposed to be a scandal became a cause for unity. And all this because of a woman who can't stand the fact that the world no longer revolves around intolerance disguised as tradition. She even tried to give a last gasp of moralism at a barbecue in the street, saying that she wasn't against anyone. I just wanted to keep the neighborhood up to a nice standard. No one responded. Nobody. Not even those who had previously murmured in support. The silence was so profound that she withdrew into herself. She returned home, and since then, she has lived locked away in her own little world, where only her own voice still believes the lies she created. But what really struck me was the conversation I had with my daughter a week later. We sat in the backyard on a beautiful evening, and she asked me if I thought it had all been worth it. I took a deep breath and said that not only was it worth it, it was necessary, because what she did, hanging that flag, was simple, but as powerful as any decree. She didn't do it to defy. She did it to exist. And what bothered that woman was never the cloth, it was her courage. The courage to show herself, to assume, to occupy space. And that's what she tried to erase. But there are things you can't hide. There's pride that doesn't fit in a drawer. And there are people who weren't born to lower their tone just because someone bothers with the sound. I never wanted to be the sheriff who wears his badge to solve neighborhood issues, but that day, I wasn't the sheriff. I was a father. I was a wall. I was a shield. And I'd do it all over again, with even more firmness, with even more clarity, with even more conviction. Because when someone tries to make a teenager feel smaller for being who she is, the only possible response is to grow up even more. The flag is still there, swaying in the wind, laughing at the attempt to censor it, which has been turned upside down. And every time I look at it, I'm reminded that even the most organized neighborhood in the world needs a reminder that freedom has no right color, no set time, no signed permission. Freedom is lived. You defend it, you show it, and the next time someone tries to erase that with a raised finger and invented rules, you can be sure they'll find us. On the balcony, at the gate, and wherever else they need to be. Because the lesson has been learned, and the message has remained. Intolerance has lost yet again. And no amount of flag waving will erase that. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave your like and comment below.